in the midst of all the craziness, and I pondered this thought, not only on my behalf, but on your behalf, immediately in my spirit, like, how do I give thanks? Immediately in my spirit, I received a response. How can I not? If you're finding it difficult to give him thanks in the season that you're in, the posture and the position that we need to take is, how can I not give thanks? That was going to be the title of today's message, but the reason that I can be so confident in my ability to give him thanks, like how could I not give him thanks? The heart of the message is the answer that I'm going to share with you. It's because he remains. And I want to speak to you guys today from the platform of he remains. So first thing I want to share with you guys today is that we need to remember that in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the confusion, in the midst of the trials and the tribulations, he remains. Can you say that with me? Just say he remains. You got to understand that he remains. And I'm going to break down what that means. He remains. James chapter 1, verses 2 through 17. James chapter 1, verses 2 to 17. He says, my brethren, my brothers, he says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that person, that man, suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord, because a double-minded man or woman is unstable in all the ways. Let the lowly brother glory in his exaltation, but the rich in his humiliation. Because as a flower of the field, he will pass away. For no sooner has the sun risen with a burning heat than it withers the grass. Its flower falls, and its beautiful appearance perishes. So the rich man also will fade away in his pursuits. Blessed is the man who endures temptation. For when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. Let no one say he is tempted. Let no one who is tempted say, I am tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Verse 15. Then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. And here's the point that I wanted to get to. Every good and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. Say with me, he remains. This verse 17 emphasizes that every good and perfect thing comes from God, the Father of lights. The Father of lights meaning that one who is true, that one who reflects only that which is true. Every good and perfect gift comes from him. And he tells us in the scripture that with him there is no variation or shadow of turning. I can give thanks always, without doubt, without question, because I can remember that he remains. And if I can remember that he remains, I can remember that he still gives good gifts as well. He doesn't change. This phrase that there is no variation or shadow of turning is very interesting. And I was just kind of spending a lot of time in meditation and studying just on that little phrase. And the word variation is a word that means the following. It means that there is no change in his form. There is no change in his character. Okay, it means also that God is not fickle. It means that not only is there no change in his form, there's no change in his character. It means very specifically that there is no change in his loyalties or his affections. I can give thanks to God because even though I can be a hot mess of a screw up, there is no variation in his position. There is no change in his loyalties. There is no change in his affections. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like this is good news from the get. He doesn't change. He doesn't change his character when we mess up ours. He does not change his loyalties when we change ours. He remains the same. And then he goes on to say that not only is there no variation in him, there is no shadow of turning. There is, if you look at different verses, it says that there is no shifting shadows. How many of you guys understand? I got a shadow right here. And the shadow does not shift unless my posture shifts. It does not change unless my position changes. In God, he says that there is no shifting of shadows. There is no shadow of turning. So based on that, the source that causes the shadow, if he ain't moving, then there's no shifting of the shadows. God is not moving, guys. God is not shifting his position. What he says he was back then is who he is today, is who he'll be tomorrow. When we look at Jesus, it says that he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't change. A lot of times we attribute our changing character and attribute that nature to God. We say, well, if I must have changed, God must have changed towards me. No, he didn't. God doesn't change. We change. We mess up, we move up, we scoot back, we scoot forward, we advance, we step back. But God's positioning does not change. So when I pondered that question, how can I give thanks to God? How can we as a family give thanks to God when there's so many craziness going on? The immediate answer is, how can I not? He remains the same. The situations that I see and the circumstances that I'm going through, they don't change his position. Do you understand what I'm saying? His position of being the Father of lights, from whom every perfect and good gift comes from, that never changed. I realize, however, that there's a problem. And the problem is a lot of us have trust issues. A lot of us have trust issues because we have not had an example of someone who has an unmoving or an unshaken character. Some of us have had relations, whether it be parental or marital relations, where others or ourselves have shifted, and it has caused us to have trust issues with our Heavenly Father. Because we haven't had that unmovable example in our lives. But I want to tell you today, if there's nothing else you hear from me, I heard very, very clearly from the Lord that the message today is that we have to give him thanks. There's no reason not to give him thanks because he remains. That's the title of today's message. It was almost, how could I not? But then I thought that would be confusing. So we're going to roll with, he remains. If you forget everything else about today, remember, he remains. And this phrase, that with him there's no shifting of shadows, all night, believe it or not, I could not stop thinking about Peter Pan. Peter Pan. You're going to ask me, what does Peter Pan have to do with the message? Well, to be honest with you, all night I didn't know. I'm like, why you got me thinking about Peter Pan? I know there was something in the shadows. I mean, I'm not a fan like that of the movie. I don't know. So I had to do a little research on Peter Pan. Yeah, when I prepare for a message, sometimes I find myself researching Peter Pan. Don't judge your brother. All right. So I asked myself, what was the deal with the shadow and Peter Pan? Do you guys know what the deal with the shadow with Peter Pan is? Like, if you remember the story, and I might not quote it accurately because I did not rewatch the movie in preparation, but apparently when he goes to the house where the kids were, he's like wrestling with the shadow, right? And then all of a sudden he goes out the window shuts, and his shadow gets cut off from his person. You guys remember that story? Similar like that, right? And so he's wrestling with his shadow. I said, and apparently Peter feels some kind of way about his own shadow. So I just looked up, why was Peter mad with his shadow? Okay, the whole story, if you remember the story, it was the struggle between, him not wanting to grow up, right, and wanting to live as a kid. This struggle between the responsibilities of adult life and the pleasures and the lack of responsibilities of child life, right? And the shadow played a role in it. The shadow represented the multiple personalities that he was struggling with. Let me bring this together, right? He was struggling with this duplicity of his own nature. If you understand the word duplicity, it means that there's two parts of his own nature he was struggling with. And I just realized that this type of imagery and his shadows, it represents things for us, because these shifting shadows, the reality is it represents trouble. Right? It represents trouble, not only in the Peter Pan movie, but if God were a God that changed today and changed tomorrow, we would have issues, because we would never know where we stand. We've all probably been with somebody or around somebody or been in a circumstance or around a circumstance that was shifting like a shifting shadow. And what is the result of that presence or that position? Uncertainty, insecurities, doubts. Yes or no? Are you hearing me? Because the shifting of shadows is problematic. It was problematic for Peter Pan. It's problematic for us. God does not shift. And when we say he remains, here's what I love about God. In him, and here's why I can just give thanks always. In him, I know what I'm going to get. In me, you don't know what you're going to get. And you guys know, if you've heard me preach once or twice, you don't know what we're going to come out when we start. We don't know if we're going to be doing a hokey pokey to start the service off, or I'm going to sing and hurt your ear. We don't know what we're going to get. In God, we always know what we're going to get, because he's predictable. He's predictable in his expectations towards us. What are his expectations towards us? He expects us to live a life that glorifies him. Simple. How many times have we overcomplicated that? His expectations towards us is that we live a life that glorifies him. How do we glorify him? We live out his will. It's simple. I know you say, oh, that's easier said than done. No, it's not. Just live a life that glorifies him. He's predictable. He has expectations towards us.